Welcome back. We are pleased to now introduce Beth Shalom Synagogue as the next team to present.
Can you tell us what grades you're in?
What do you say?
What grades are you in?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ninth grade.
Everybody?
We're in 10th and 9th.
Rachel Rubenstein had recently purchased an Aliva self-driving car. This model is programmed by Aliva Industries to react quickly in response to the condition of the road, and therefore had no option for manual input. While en route to the grocery store one afternoon, Rachel was listening to a podcast, directing none of her attention to the road ahead. With a sudden lurch, Rachel realized that her car had crashed into the vehicle of Shimon Shalom. Onlookers recall that Rachel's car had done so to avoid hitting a pedestrian. It has been established that this was the safest action for her car to take, as it was too late for the vehicle to come to a complete stop before hitting the pedestrian. Shimon's injuries granted him an extended hospital stay, prompting him to sue Rachel for the cost of his hospital bills, the cost of the damage to his car, and for the money lost due to his time away from work. Rachel Rubenstein, however, places the responsibility for the accident upon Aliva Industries, claiming that it occurred as a result of the car's programming. In response to Rachel's claim, Eli Levine, the CEO of Aliva Industries, maintained that if her car had swerved into Shimon's, it must have been the correct action for her car to take, and it is therefore not the company's fault. We, the Beit Din, were tasked to determine what halakhic damages were at play in this case, who was liable to pay, and whether or not Aliva should modify their programming.
First, we had to determine the types of halachic damages in play. There are 4 types of halachic damages listed in Bava Kama 1:1: the fire, the chewer, the pit, and the ox. The pedestrian in this situation is most comparable to the pit. According to Bava Kama 9b through 10a, the pit is more strict than the ox, since the pit was dangerous from the beginning. It is considered forewarned from the beginning, neither of which apply to the ox. In other words, the pit, unlike the ox, is inherently dangerous, and those at risk of being harmed by the pit should be warned of the danger it presents. Similarly, all drivers must be cautious of jaywalkers, as jaywalkers always possess the potential to cause damage. Bava Kama 9b through 10a continues to say that the danger imposed by the pit is not in its ability to move around and cause damage, unlike the danger imposed by the ox or the fire. Although the pedestrian, unlike the pit, is able to move, the danger it imposes is not linked to its mobility. Instead, its inconvenient location is what makes it a danger. In this case, the pedestrian's position in the road instigated the crash, as Rachel's car had been forced to swerve in the opposite direction. If her vehicle had come into direct contact with the pedestrian, however, the pedestrian would have suffered damage, and the car most likely would not have. A literal pit, on the other hand, would have caused damage to the car, but would have been incapable of suffering damage itself. This is a difference between the pedestrian and the pit, as a pedestrian would always suffer injury upon impact, but wouldn't always cause damage to what hits it. The car is analogous to the ox. According to Bava Kama 3:10, the ox, as opposed to the pit, is not considered dangerous or forewarned from the beginning. This description also applies to the car, as a self-driving vehicle isn't dangerous by design. Although both the ox and the car don't pose a constant danger to society, they do possess the potential to cause damage in certain situations. The self-driving car is a sentient danger, as it is programmed to choose its own courses of action through the analysis of its surroundings. This is like the ox, which also has the ability to do so.
Next, we must determine who is at fault and who is liable to pay. Rachel is not at fault, according to Tosafot Bava Kama 27b, which implies a person is not at fault when under duress. Rachel was clearly under duress, considering there were no manual controls in the car, meaning the actions of the car were out of her control. Ketubot 19a supports Aliva's exemption. It states the only 3 things standing in the way of saving a life are idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder. Aliva's programming opted to injure someone in a car rather than risk killing a pedestrian. The car wouldn't be considered liable for the same reason. Instead of placing the fault on Aliva or Rachel, we posit that the pedestrian is at fault. The pedestrian's responsibility is supported by Bava Kama 3:5, which implies that in a case where damage is caused, a person who fails to signal his or her intentions is at fault. The pedestrian did not give warning before crossing the street and therefore is at fault. Despite this decision, Rachel is still liable to pay, even though she did nothing wrong. Bava Kama 1:1 speaks of an ox, a pit, a chewer, and a fire. It states, the common qualities of all of them is that their nature is to cause damage, and guarding them is your responsibility, and when they damage, the liable party is obligated to repay from the best land. This can be interpreted as, no matter the circumstances, if one of these things causes damage, the owner is liable to pay. Shemot 22:5 also supports this position. It states that the starter of a fire that spreads is required to make restitution. The start of the fire is Rachel starting the car. The spreading of the fire is her car hitting Shimon Shalom's. She may have started the fire with no intention of damage, but the fire spread on its own and caused damage. Additionally, Bava Kama 2:6 states a person is always considered warned, i.e. fully liable, whether accidental, intentional, whether awake or asleep. This means Rachel was warned of the possibility that the car would crash and that she would have to pay for any damages caused by it. Luckily for Rachel, she doesn't have to pay all the expenses. According to Bava Kama 8, an ox only pays damages and is exempt from the fine for a loss of pregnancy. Because the metaphorical ox in this situation, the car, absolutely hit Shimon, Rachel is required to pay damages regardless of her responsibility or the car's. The payment would be made by Rachel's insurance company, as it is the company's responsibility to cover the liability of those they insure.
Aliva should not change the programming of their cars. The car did the only thing possible it could have done in the situation it was in. The only other option was to hit and potentially kill a pedestrian. The aforementioned Ketubot 19a supports this. According to this source, the car's programming is excused for opting to injure Shimon Shalom rather than to possibly kill the pedestrian. After reviewing both the sources and the facts of the case, we determined that the pedestrian was at fault and that Rachel's insurance company has to pay. We categorized the car as the ox. The ox is a sentient danger and is not forewarned from the beginning, which is like the car. And the car's purpose is to analyze the situation and prevent death, which is exactly what it did, which means it fulfilled its purpose. The pedestrian was at fault because if he was not jaywalking in the middle of the road, this whole situation would not have happened. Aliva Incorporated was not at fault because the car is excused by it saving a life. Rachel's insurance company is liable to pay because Rachel bought the car and as a result accepted all damages that came with it. Thank you.
Judges, you now have 8 minutes to ask questions of the team presentation.
I have a question about one of your last comments there. You said that Rachel bought the car and therefore accepted all damages that come with it, and you impose those damages on the insurance company even though you said Rachel was not at fault. So my question is that fair?
Regardless of whether it is fair, that is what the law says, and the law is the law.
Shouldn't the law be fair?
Yes, but that's not our job to change the law to make it fair. Our job was merely to interpret the law.
Okay. My next question is, you said that Rachel was under duress, right?
Yes.
So didn't she choose to get in the car in the first place?
Yes, but she had no control over what the car did in the situations when she was driving.
When she chose to get in, did she know she would not have any control?
Yes.
So how does that affect whether she's under duress?
Well, she would be under duress because it's not an expected situation where the car would crash, or where the car would be in a situation where it has to crash.
Why is that not an expected situation, that cars might crash?
I shouldn't say not an expected situation, but it's not an intended situation, and it's not constant.
It has also been like established that this model of car hasn't had the tendency of causing crashes in the past. This model.
You use the term sentient danger. Not a term that I've come across very recently. Could you help me understand what you mean by sentient danger?
What we mean by sentient danger is that the car is programmed to make decisions based on its surroundings, and ergo, it is allowed to make decisions based on what it can do, based on the situation at hand. It's a sentient danger in the sense that it thinks things through in its own way, based on its programming.
So I'm not sure why an ox would be perceived as having like decision-making abilities. Isn't an ox an animal?
The ox is an animal. Excuse me.
Yeah.
May I continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Right.
The ox is an animal, yet it makes decisions based on its surroundings, based on its primal instincts, like the car in the sense that it's making decisions based on its surrounding, based on what it feels it should do to save a life, which is exactly what it did. It followed the programming.
Okay.
Do all oxes do that, or is there any reference in the sources to a different kind of ox?
I'm making it somewhat of a generalization in the sense that most ox now, and I imagine back then too, did make decisions based on their surrounding. They do choose to where to graze if they're wild. They live accordingly to how they surroundings.
I want to explore the idea of the pedestrian as the pit. So you linked the, you said that a pit is not mobile. And the pedestrian was mobile, but the problem was it happened to be in that particular place at a particular time as a pit would be. But couldn't the pedestrian have been at any number of different places at any given time, whereas that a pit would not have been subject to the same guessing, trying to figure out where it's going to be when?
So, yes, the pedestrian was able to make his or her own decisions in terms of where it was going to be at that time. But the fact is that because it was there, directly in front of in front of Rachel's car, when it wasn't supposed to be, because it can be assumed the pedestrian was jaywalking, that caused Rachel's car to swerve, and the pedestrian did not signal his or her intentions to cross the street, and so it was unexpected, and the car therefore was forced to swerve at the last minute, and the pedestrian's movement is irrelevant because if it was unable to move but still in that same location, it would have provided the same obstacle.
So you're saying it's as if the car were driving and then it suddenly saw that it was about to fall into a pit and therefore moved out of the way?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Anything else?
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now a 5-minute break and then Yachad is up.
Okay.